What if I told you that the man masquerading as an educator online is nothing more than a propaganda machine, an atheist, deep state funded anti-Hindu terrorist sitting safely in Germany? Meet Dhruv Rathee, the so-called YouTuber and social media influencer who presents himself as a rational voice of truth, but whose content reeks deliberate deception, selective outrage, and anti-Hindu venom. Let's be blunt. This man doesn't educate, he manipulates. Rathee's videos are a masterclass in misinformation, no citation, no credible sources, and no academic rigor. He recently had to delete a video on Sikh history after it outraged the global Sikh community for misrepresenting revered Sikh gurus. Legal complaints were filed for hurting religious sentiments. And then there's his malicious video on the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam. This is where Rathee's deceit crosses all lines. Rathee deliberately hides the truth that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam, has never been convicted of a single crime, despite being targeted with over 120 fabricated legal cases, all exposed as false through due process of law. Rathee ignored international legal opinions. He ignored court rulings. He ignored medical experts. He lied again. Why? Because the truth doesn't serve his agenda. Hatred against Hindus does. Despite over 70 assassination attempts, over 120 false legal cases, and decades of defamation, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism hasn't just survived, he thrived. In mere 15 years, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam, all alone, has served over 1 billion people, offering free food, free education, free medical care, and spiritual guidance across 150 countries. He's even rebuilt the only Hindu nation, KAILASA, from scratch. Can Dhruv Rathee do that? What has he built? What has he contributed to society? Nothing but lies and links to buy his next product. 2021, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights of India launched an inquiry after Rathee threatened a 15-year-old, a minor, and illegally tracked his location. Carolina Goswami, who fact-checked him, received over 220 rape threats from his fans. Arvind Kejriwal had to apologize in India's Supreme Court for retweeting Rathee's defamatory content. Dabur India sued Rathee for trademark violations. In 2024, Rathee used hashtag Nirbhaya2 to sensationalize a rape murder case, then exposed the victim's identity, directly violating Supreme Court guidelines. What kind of educator does that? Dhruv Rathee gets his facts from the corrupt anti-Hindu racist media in India, ranked the most dangerous worldwide for misinformation. These platforms are owned by political mafias used to attack Hindu leaders, provoke violence, and silence indigenous Hindu voices. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam, and KAILASA are the primary targets of this war, a war against truth, against indigenous traditions, against the ancient Sanatan Hindu Dharma. Any ordinary human would have broken under the sheer weight of what the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has endured, but not him. He withstood over 70 assassination attempts, 120 false legal cases, and an unending barrage of hate speech, harassment, and defamation across over 25,000 print articles and over 17,000 hours of online content. To endure all this and still serving humanity with unwavering compassion and love, that kind of strength, resilience, and grace isn't just rare, it is divine. This is what makes the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam, a living embodiment of the divine, God in human form. And Dhruv Rathee, just a hate-mongering puppet, a global war on dharma, selling outrage, profiting off lies, and threatening teenagers when exposed. Even a child could tell it isn't fake, says Dhruv Rathee. Really? Then why did top global forensic experts call it one of the most grossly fabricated deepfakes they've ever seen? Dhruv Rathee shamelessly dismissed the infamous deepfake video targeting the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as not fake. But here's what he doesn't want you to know. Independent forensic investigations, not one but multiple, confirmed that the video is digitally manipulated, spliced, and completely fabricated. Some of the world's leading video forensic experts submitted sworn affidavits admissible in court dismantling the clip. Primo, a certified expert, said, "I have never seen such a grossly edited and altered series of defamatory videos in my time as a practicing audio and video forensic expert. This isn't opinion. 2 High Court orders from Karnataka explicitly banned the video's broadcast, including any reference, mention, or attribution to the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism or any other individuals in the footage." TV channels, print media, and even the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting were ordered to comply. But here's the kicker. Most media houses defied the court, kept re-uploading the fake video like Dhruv Rathee, and continue spreading anti-Hindu hate propaganda even today. On December 18, 2012, Hansraj Saxena, the chief operating officer of Sun TV, the very network behind the broadcast, publicly confessed that they fabricated the video to destroy the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism.
The news editor, our department இருக்கிற ஆளும் அவங்க பண்ண ஒரு மிரட்டல் நாடகம் தான் இந்த நித்யானந்தா. அந்த நியூஸ் டிபார்ட்மெண்ட் எதுவா இருந்தாலும் காசு கொடுத்தா போடுவாங்க, காசு கொடுத்தா நிப்பாட்டுவாங்க. அந்த நியூஸ் எடிட்டர் ராஜா இன் டீம் தான் சார், அவங்க தான் சார் பண்றது. அவங்க டீம்ல போனது ஒரு நெட்வொர்க் வச்சு தமிழ்நாடு ஃபுல்லா ஆட்களை வச்சுக்கிட்டு ஒரு ஃபேக்டரியை போய் கவர் பண்ண சொல்றது. ஃபேக்டரியில இருந்து கழிவு நீர் வருது, மக்கள் பீதியில இருக்காங்க, அவசப்படுறாங்க, 2 கழிவு இருங்குற மாதிரி ஷாட்டை போடுறது. மறுபடியும் பின்னாடியே ஒரு ஆள் அமைச்சு காசு பேசி பேரம் பேசி.
He repeated the same in a sworn affidavit filed in the U.S. District Court, California in 2014. March 27, 2012. Even India's own press council censured multiple news outlets for broadcasting fake news and hate speech based on this deepfake. September 2, 2013, the Broadcast Content Complaints Council forced Star Vijay TV to apologize. In 2014, the News Broadcasting Standards Authority ordered takedowns and apologies. Yet, the media kept going. Why? Because the agenda is clear: incite hate against the Hindu Guru, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, and character assassinate him at any cost. International legal icons like King's Counsel's Jeffrey Robertson, a former jurist at the United Nations Justice Council, independently verified that the video was later proved to be false. A judge ordered the television station to run an apology for it every 2 hours for 7 days, and one person involved confessed and was jailed for extortion. Lenin, the man behind the fake video, has 3 active non-bailable arrest warrants as of February 15, 2024. His partner in crime, his lawyer Sridhar, is already behind bars. Charges: rape, extortion, criminal intimidation, and their goal: extort 100 crore Indian rupees or $12 million from KAILASA. The United Nations has taken note and published 22 reports on the persecution of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and KAILASA, backed by solid evidence, legal testimony, and expert analysis. All of this is publicly available, easily accessible online. And yet, Dhruv Rathee, who parades as an educator, deliberately conceals it all. Why? Because he isn't educating, he is indoctrinating, selling sensationalism, distorting facts, and cashing in on the very hate speech that the courts, the UN, and global experts have condemned. If you still believe Dhruv Rathee's version of the truth, you've been manipulated. This isn't just about one video. It is about a decades-long orchestrated persecution of a Hindu guru using deepfakes, media propaganda, and outright lies. It is about continuing the legacy of colonialism, a legacy that erased 10,000 Hindu traditions, annihilated 200 Hindu kingdoms, massacred 500 million Hindus, demolished thousands of temples, wiped out 1 million gurukuls and Hindu universities and burned 80 million sacred Hindu scriptures. Dhruv Rathee, self-styled YouTuber, full-time misinformation machine, makes wild, baseless claims about a rape case that never even existed in the eyes of the law. 4 US courts, federal and state, cleared the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism of all charges. The accusers, Aarti Rao and Vinay Bharadwaj. They were hit with legal sanctions, contempt charges, arrest warrants, and a combined fine of over $7 million for lies, perjury, and malicious prosecution. In just 1 year, the Ohio court dismissed the rape claims as groundless. The police refused to even register a case due to total lack of evidence. Vinay Bharadwaj also attempted to file a civil case. It was dismissed within just 2 years as baseless. Due to repeated acts of contempt of court by the false rape accuser Aarti Rao, the Michigan court issued a contempt order and 2 bench warrants for her arrest. These were based on her consistent failure to comply with court directives, including her mandatory appearance at her deposition. Similarly, in California, Aarti Rao's persistent disregard for court orders, including failing to appear for her deposition, led the court to issue a judgment against her amounting to more than $25,000. After 2 years of defying court orders and committing perjury, the false male rape accuser Vinay Bharadwaj was fined nearly $500,000. His fabricated case against the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was ultimately dismissed by a California court. Bharadwaj's appeal of the lower court's dismissal and sanctions was also rejected. Instead, the court imposed an additional fine of more than $32,000. In 2012, a Washington state judge sentenced Vinay Bharadwaj to 5 years in prison for sexually exploiting a minor girl in the United States. After he completed his sentence, Bharadwaj was deported to India by a US immigration court on grounds of moral turpitude. In India, the initial false charges took 8 years to reach court, and even after 15 years of malicious prosecution have resulted in no conviction to date. In contrast, the US judicial system, widely recognized for its stronger adherence to the rule of law, acted decisively. According to the World Justice Project's Global Rule of Law Index, the United States ranks 26th, while India ranks 79th. Under the doctrine of res judicata, once a matter has been fully adjudicated and a final judgment rendered by a competent court, courts in other jurisdictions are bound to respect and uphold that decision. Moreover, the constitutional protection against double jeopardy ensures that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism cannot be prosecuted again for the same matter that has already been conclusively resolved. Interpol, adhering to international legal principles, including the res judicata, considered these facts and recognized the binding authority of the US court's judgment. Interpol categorically refused requests to issue any notices against the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. On May 27, 2017, the Indian judiciary recognized the US court order and penalized Aarti Rao, the false rape victim, ordering damages equivalent to $500,000 in Indian currency. Dhruv Rathee claimed many women who went to this Baba's ashram filed complaints of rape. But where are these many women? Where are the complaints? Where is the evidence? Here's what the official record of Karnataka State Police memo to the High Court dated June 11, 2010 says. No witness has come forward. No evidence exists. Nithyananda is not required for further interrogation. That's the state police themselves speaking to the High Court of Karnataka. No victims, no allegations, no case. On April 21, 2010, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was illegally arrested without a single accuser, without a single statement of rape. Still, he was jailed for 53 days, tortured, isolated, defamed. And for what? Desperate, the Karnataka State Police even begged the public to come forward. They offered cash rewards for false testimonies. And guess what? Not a single person came forward, not one. Why? Because it was all a lie. The High Court of Karnataka poured out this farce. They condemned the police for dragging a case with 0 victims and 0 evidence. In 2012, they tried again. Another illegal arrest. But this time, the Karnataka High Court dropped the hammer without any authority, contrary to law, without jurisdiction. The entire case was quashed, completely wiped out, discredited, done. So Dhruv Rathee, stop spreading lies to your gullible audience. In his video, Dhruv Rathee claimed Aarti Rao, living in America, had alleged that Nithyananda had raped her for 5 years. But here's what Rathee will not tell you, because the US court documents do not lie. Rathee does. On August 8, 2012, the Michigan court ordered the University of Michigan Hospital to release the medical records of Aarti Rao, the so-called victim in Rathee's narrative. The hospital obeyed. And what did the records show? Aarti Rao has been carrying genital herpes since at least 2004, an incurable, highly contagious sexually transmitted disease. Yet, she claimed she was raped multiple times by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism over 5 years. But the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's medical tests showed the exact opposite. 0 STDs, no trace ever. If her allegations were true, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam would have tested positive. But the science says she lied. Now, let's look at just one day of her fairy tale. November 30, 2005. Her medical records show she was being treated in Michigan, USA. On that exact day, she claimed she was being raped in Salem, Tamil Nadu. But the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, he was in Birdi, Bengaluru, conducting a full-day public meditation program witnessed by over 200 people. So let's get this straight. Aarti Rao is in America. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is in Birdi. But the rape happened in Salem? No victim. No evidence, only lies, media trials, and a well-orchestrated character assassination. In his desperate attempt to discredit the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Dhruv Rathee makes a bizarre claim. He says a genetic mutation happened when he was 12. He is neither male nor female. And then he says he lied about being impotent and a virgin, but facts don't care about Rathee's fantasies. 11 independent medical experts from Ohio, California, Michigan, Canada, and India reviewed the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's medical reports and gave one unanimous verdict. Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam is physically and hormonally incapable of sexual activity. Rape? Scientifically, medically, biologically, impossible. Let's break it down. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's testosterone measured 12.5 nanogram per deciliter. That's less than 6% of the minimum normal for an adult male. Doctors call it severe hypogonadism, a condition that can be faked and can be created short-term. Luteinizing hormone is produced by the pituitary gland to stimulate testosterone. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's alleged levels? Absolutely low. Doppler ultrasounds revealed significant varicocele and critically low blood flow in visceral organs. Physically incapable of sexual activity, not theory, not narrative, but biological fact. Dr. Mark Vogel, top urologist from Siddhar's Sinai Medical Center, says Sri Nithyananda Swami has all the 3 causes of erectile dysfunction: vasculogenic, hormonal, and psychological, which provide enough clear evidence to support Sri Nithyananda Swami's claim that he is incapable of sexual acts and thus did not perform rape and unnatural sex. And yet, Dhruv Rathee wants you to believe that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism raped someone? This is not just medically absurd, it is a malicious criminal lie. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is a lifelong sannyasi initiated at the age of 3. His yogic body is built for radiating enlightenment. Dhruv Rathee claimed that a female monk was murdered at the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's Adinam. But here are the facts of what actually happened. The female monk died of a natural cause, a congenital heart condition, confirmed beyond doubt by medical post-mortem reports, official police investigation, written testimony from her own mother, and family history of cardiac death. So ask yourself, why are people like Dhruv Rathee spreading lies? Who gains from turning a natural death into a scandal? This isn't just misinformation, it's a smear campaign against Hindu gurus. Do you remember the Palghar mob lynching? In his sensational video, Dhruv Rathee smugly claimed that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism fled India, that he ran from justice. But the truth is, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism never fled. He was exiled. No Indian court ever declared the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism a fugitive. No warrant of escape, no charge of absconding. Instead, the system itself turned criminal, violating his fundamental rights and illegally impounding his passport without due process. On April 29, 2010, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's passport was illegally revoked based on the false rape case where no victim ever came forward. Not a shred of credible testimony, just a politically motivated character assassination. Meanwhile, real criminals accused of murder, rape and terrorism travel freely. Salman Khan, Prajwal Revana, Dawood Ibrahim, not one of them was denied a passport. But when it comes to a Hindu guru who dares to revive Sanatan Dharma, he is hunted, harassed and thrown into statelessness. According to international law, the right to live and return to one's country is a fundamental human right. The Supreme Court of India reaffirmed this repeatedly. Despite this witch hunt, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism continued to travel internationally from 2010 to 2018, always returning to India every single time. He never fled. He faced every single legal battle. On the appeal of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism to the Minister of External Affairs, the illegal impounding of his passport was revoked in August 2010. On February 23, 2012, the trial court in the false case against the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism passed the order to release interim custody of the passport till the disposal of the case. Yet, in 2018, despite being a natural-born Indian citizen and despite a clear court order granting him custody of his passport, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was shockingly denied renewal. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism personally appeared at the passport office, submitted every required document and was still stonewalled without reason. A blatant violation of law, justice and basic human rights. The goal is very clear. Erase him, strip him of citizenship, smear his image and silence the revival of Hinduism he represents. But while deep state elements in India waged war against its own enlightened master, the rest of the world honored him for his contributions to global peace, humanitarian service and reviving Hindu heritage. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism didn't build empires of money. He built empires of enlightenment, temples, gurukuls, universities, medical camps, food banks, all while under attack because he dared to be a living embodiment of Hindu power. So next time someone calls him a fugitive, ask yourself, who really is running? The one upholding Dharma or the one trying to destroy it? Dhruv Rathee claimed in his video that children were tortured in his ashrams, that they were starved, that they were forced to beat each other. Where's the evidence? His entire allegation rests on one name, Sarah Landry. Who is this Sarah Landry? A Corpus Dei cult member who wanted to portray herself as the next godhead for humanity. And did we mention? Landry has been accused of child rape. Yes, child rape. This is the kind of person Dhruv Rathee's academy relies on to craft his facts. So let's talk real evidence. What is actually happening at KAILASA's Nithyananda Gurukul? Here's what the United Nations has to say. In its report, it highlights stunning outcomes from independent scientific assessments. Bender Gestalt 2 scores show that the Gurukul students are far above average in cognitive ability. Sloan IQ tests show that 50% of students scored in the genius or very superior range, IQs over 120. Their intellectual age is 2.7 years ahead of their chronological age. In fact, 83 of these students are mentally ahead of their age group. That's not abuse, that's brilliance. So why is this Dhruv Rathee promoting lies from criminally accused cult members while ignoring globally verified proof of success? Rathee throws another wild accusation, claiming Nithyananda held 2 minor girls captive in his Ahmedabad ashram. But here's what he doesn't want you to know. On February 2nd, 2024, the Gujarat High Court completely exonerated the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam, of all kidnapping and abduction charges. The Gujarat High Court personally spoke to the young women Rathee claimed were captive. And here's what the judge concluded in the court order. The judge says, the court satisfied that the both are adults mature enough to understand their well-being and apparently are happy at the place where they are presently proceeding and on their spiritual path. Additionally, the court stated that they were not in any way in illegal confinement, no duress, no influence, just 2 women freely choosing a life as a Hindu sannyasi. And finally, the Gujarat High Court states in paragraph 23, in view of the aforesaid, the court deems it fit to discharge the notice and dismiss the petition accordingly. And one more thing, at the time these crimes were allegedly happening in Gujarat, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam, hadn't even stepped foot in Gujarat for over a decade. He wasn't in the state, let alone in the scene. So why does Rathee still push this lie? Because the truth doesn't sell, but a juicy scandal that gets views. The real story? No victims, no kidnapping, just empowered women choosing a life that anti-Hindu deep state racist puppets like Dhruv Rathee doesn't want you to understand. Dhruv Rathee calls KAILASA a self-proclaimed Hindu nation. He marks it as an imaginary country that exists only online. Rathee is mocking a sovereign revival of the world's most ancient, enlightened Hindu civilization, the only Hindu nation recognized by international law. He says KAILASA doesn't meet the Montevideo Convention criteria. Let's make it painfully clear to him. KAILASA has a permanent population. It has a defined territory and a government. It has a functional legal system, a constitution, and ability to enter into relations. Dhruv Rathee's self-declared title of educator and his so-called academy collapse under the weight of their own ignorance and bias. When facts are twisted and hate is marketed as education, what you get isn't knowledge. It is propaganda. Rathee, I could walk you through concepts like juridical statehood, the doctrine of continuity, acquired rights, and sovereign equality under international law. But let's be honest, this is a bit too advanced for your brain. But for those in the audience who value truth over hate and facts over colonial era bigotry, there's a video on KAILASA's juridical statehood in the description. It unveils the revival of the United States of KAILASA, the world's most ancient enlightened Hindu civilizational nation, brought back to life by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, formally coronated as the sovereign king of 21 ancient indigenous Hindu kingdoms. Hindus have lost over 6 million square kilometers of sovereign land, illegally seized through brutal colonization and violent invasions, and yet Dhruv Rathee continues to mock their revival. He is parroting the same colonial narrative that erased the Hindu civilization in the first place. It is voices like his that silence Hindu struggles. It is this same hatred towards Hindus that allowed the 1990 mass exodus of Kashmiri Hindus, driven out of their ancestral homeland while the world watched in silence. Rathee is repackaging oppression in modern language. Dhruv Rathee claimed KAILASA fooled the United Nations. KAILASA is the first Hindu nation to speak out on a global platform about the generational persecution, ethnocide, genocide, and systematic human rights violations faced by over 1 billion Hindus. This is a cry for justice, and it's a voice the United Nations has heard. and officially recorded. The United Nations has published 22 detailed reports submitted by KAILASA exposing the ongoing Hindu genocide, including the violent persecution of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, the sovereign leader of the only Hindu nation. What's more disturbing is how Rathee spins attacks on these legitimate human rights efforts into clickbait, disrespecting the struggle of persecuted Hindus globally, whose only demand is peace, dignity, and the right to exist. Dhruv Rathee alleges that New York politicians blindly signed diplomatic ties with KAILASA, that they did not do any background checks, no due diligence. Wrong again. KAILASA and the city of New York were in official communication for over 6 months before the relationship was formalized. Dhruv Rathee's attempts to whitewash colonization and delegitimize KAILASA are not just dishonest, they are dangerous. They continue the same oppression that led to tragedies like the 1990 forced exodus of Kashmiri Hindus, the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh, or the Pahalgam attack, while the world looks the other way. In his video, Dhruv Rathee spins a wild tale that people from KAILASA arrived in Bolivia as tourists, tricked indigenous communities into signing an incomprehensible 1,000-year lease written in English and tried to grab their land. But here's the irony. At timestamp 2407 in his video, Rathee himself flashes the lease, and it is in Spanish, not English. KAILASA never coerced anyone. Indigenous leaders freely welcomed our humanitarian outreach, free education, nutrition, and healthcare because they saw real results. These partnerships weren't traps. They were choices made with dignity and hope. Bolivia's own constitution enshrines indigenous peoples' right to autonomy and self-governance, including the power to enter into agreements. So no, Rathee, this wasn't exploitation. This was international collaboration, fully, legally, voluntarily entered and meticulously documented. KAILASA has gone above and beyond to honor Bolivian constitutional standards. We've ensured that payment is effectuated only after ratification, demonstrating our unwavering commitment to due process and respect for local laws. This clause leaves no room for ambiguity. It guarantees that every transaction is conducted with the full consent and ratification of the Bolivian government, strictly adhering to international law and honoring national sovereignty. Additionally, all of these agreements were duly notarized, protocolized, and apostilled by the government of Bolivia. Now, for the most disturbing lie, Rathee parrots that 20 foreign nationals linked to KAILASA were expelled and sent back to their real countries. But this is a grotesque distortion of what really happened. March 24, armed men with covered faces stormed La Paz International Airport at 1 a.m. and abducted 12 innocent women, including a pregnant mother, a minor child, and elderly women.
Please help us. We don't know where we are going, and we don't know for what crime they are arresting us like this. You can see they are heavily armed. We didn't do anything wrong. For what we deserve to be treated like this? One of us is an 18 years old girl. They don't care. They actually came to her and grabbed her from her sleep. And when I backed them, I told her she's a kid, please. She's barely 18 years old. They don't listen. Police came to her.
They were peaceful humanitarian volunteers complying with every law. They were violently dragged from their sleep, assaulted, insulted, threatened, and denied legal counsel, a blatant violation of international law and local laws. Their communication devices were seized, passwords forcibly extracted, and no arrest warrant was shown. They were then thrown into unmarked armored vehicles driven for 3 hours through freezing mountain roads and dumped in a remote border town, barefoot and without warm clothes, food, water, or shelter. Temperatures were near freezing. Ice was on the ground. this was not a deportation. It was a deep state sanctioned kidnap and brutality. Even more chilling, the armed personnel covered their faces and removed their name tags, an intentional cover-up to avoid accountability under human rights law. This wasn't an isolated attack. It was a coordinated cross-country witch hunt. In Beni, 3 Hindu monks from KAILASA were surrounded by an armed mob. One was physically assaulted, bled from the foot injury, and had his sacred Rudraksha necklace violently ripped off his neck. In Santa Cruz, armed forces scaled walls and invaded the private residence of 18 Hindu female monks who were subjected to physical abuse, insults, and violation of privacy. These actions violate multiple international laws. This wasn't deportation, it was persecution, deliberate, racist, and violent. And Dhruv Rathee is not reporting facts. He's justifying crimes. Dhruv Rathee has once again proven that he knows nothing about Hinduism, and yet he has the audacity to label the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as a fake Baba. This is not just disrespectful. This is a blatant attack on Hindu traditions, sacred institutions, and the lived realities of over 1 billion Hindus. And coming from someone who publicly calls himself as a Hindu atheist, his comments are not only ignorant, they are dangerous. Dhruv Rathee's most absurd claim that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam, copied the Pope and just gave himself the title of Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, it seems. He even has the audacity to declare that the title of Supreme Pontiff doesn't exist in Hinduism. Let's stop right here. Coming from whom? A man who proudly calls himself a Hindu atheist? Someone who mocks the very fabric of Hinduism while pretending to be its authority? What does an atheist know about Guru Shishya Parampara? The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam, is not some self-declared spiritual influencer. He is the legitimately coronated Guru, Supreme Pontiff, Emperor, and sovereign leader of multiple ancient Hindu lineages and kingdoms. His titles, Guru Mahasanidhanams, Acharya Mahamandareshwar, and the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism are rooted in recognized apostolic lineages passed down through unbroken traditions stretching over millennia. This is Hinduism's living, breathing continuity, preserved, protected, and embodied in the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam. He is coronated and legally recognized Guru Mahasanidhanam, the spiritual and temporal leader of several ancient Hindu kingdoms and monastic orders. He is the 293rd Pontiff of the Madurai Adinam, a spiritual seat that is over 4,000 years old, where none other than Devi Meenakshi, the incarnation of Parashakti herself, was the ruler. He is the Acharya Mahamandareshwar of Atal Akhara and Mahanirvani Akhara, where even Gautam Buddha once took monastic vows. In 2015, thousands of Hindu leaders officially coronated Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam as the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, with public declarations by Hindu pontiffs like Shri Mahant Ravindra Puri, the head of the Akhil Bharatiya Akhara Parishad, representing over 2.5 million Hindu monks in Bharat. This is not one man's claim. This is the consensus of a living spiritual heritage of Hinduism. He is the 203rd Emperor of the Kingdom of Surangi, a civilization with over 14,000 years of recorded history. He is the 233rd head of the Kanchi KAILASA Sarvanapita, the same institution that coronated kings of the Chola and Pallava dynasties, empires that once ruled and enlightened half the world. Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam doesn't just declare that he is God. He declares, you are God. This is the core of Hinduism. As Adi Shankaracharya proclaimed in the Nirvana Shatakam, Shivoham, I am Shiva. As the Chandogya Upanishad says, Tattvamasi, that thou art. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is not inventing a new doctrine. He is reviving the very soul of Sanatana Dharma, suppressed for centuries by invasions, colonizations, and modern-day influences like Dhruv Rathee. Rathee's mocking of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is not just an insult to one man, it is a violent attack on sacred traditions of over 1 billion Hindus. It is a colonial mockery dressed in modern clothing. But no matter how many lies they spread, the truth cannot be erased. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam, stands tall, bearing the weight of an ancient civilization, reviving the sacred sciences and restoring dignity to persecuted Hindus across the world. Dhruv Rathee ridicules the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism for revealing what no one dared to question, that E is not equal to MC square.
E equal to not MC square. Cannot be MC square. What is MC square? The difference between intensity and continuity. What is energy? What is matter? Matter is continuity, energy is intensity. MC. What do you call as matter? Anything continue. What do you call as energy? Anything intense. The intensity and continuity is separate for a non-veg crooked brain which has seen only ups and downs. Only a vegetarian brain which can retain the experiences continuously without losing the intensity can understand M and C is not MC, it is MC.
But here's the twist that exposes Rathee's stupidity. Just 4 years later, in 2022, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to 3 scientists for proving Einstein wrong in a lab. Yet, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam was mocked for revealing what Nobel laureates would only confirm years later. So who is really behind the curve here? Hinduism's contributions to science are not new. They've been respected by icons of modern physics. Erwin Schrödinger declared, "In all world, there's no kind of framework within which we can find consciousness in the plural. The only solution lies in the ancient wisdom of the Upanishad and Vedanta that teaches that consciousness is singular. All happenings are played out in one universal consciousness." Brian David Josephson, Nobel laureate, affirmed, "The Vedanta and the Sankhya hold the key to the laws of the mind and thought process, which are correlated to the quantum field." So why is Dhruv Rathee so desperate to mock the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam? You have to ask yourself. And why is he so bent on to belittle Hindu knowledge? What is his agenda? Dhruv Rathee's entire shtick is neo-colonial gaslighting, taking Hindu wisdom out of context, mocking it with Western buzzwords, and deliberately misrepresenting the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism to discredit not just a person, but an entire living knowledge tradition. What Dhruv Rathee is doing is the digital age version of the same colonial mindset that dismissed ancient sciences as superstition and called entire civilization savage. Rathee isn't educating, he is echoing the racist civilizing mission that justified colonial genocide and religious erasure and epistemic violence. No leader alive has done what the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is doing. With his own hands, he swept temples, washed devotees' clothes, cleaned sacred sites, carved stone deities, plowed lands. He built a nation brick by brick. KAILASA, the only Hindu nation on planet Earth. Dhruv Rathee dares to mock Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam's childhood, sneering that there's not much information about him back then. From a small village in Tamil Nadu, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism rose through unimaginable tapas. At just 17, Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam walked away from home barefoot, embarking on a Parivachaka Yatra across the sacred land of Bharat, wandering alone through dense forests, meditating for hours in remote caves, living with Himalayan yogis in silence and austerity. Every step, every breath was dedicated to reviving the sacred sciences of Hinduism, not for fame, not for comfort, but for dharma. While Dhruv Rathee sits behind a mic and slanders, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has been recognized across continents for his hard work and relentless humanitarian services. Guinness World Records, Asia Book of Records, honorary doctorates, awards for humanitarian service, certificates of recognition from statesmen, keys to the city, the highest civilian honor a US city can bestow. This is about what one enlightened being can do when the entire world stands against him and still cannot stop him. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is producing millions of enlightened beings like him. People like Dhruv Rathee mocked. Bhagavan Nithyananda Paramashivam manifested a nation. The world doubted, KAILASA rose.